there, Balls96, but the O is a 0 and we are back with yet another video in yet another week, and this time we are looking at the best player for each Premier League team during the 23-24 season. I'm going to be looking at one man who stood out from the rest of his teammates and shone brightest amongst the pack. So, with no further ado, here is my list of each team's best player of the season. Arsenal, Martin Odegaard. This was a toss-up for me between Martin Odegaard or Declan Rice. They've had other standout players as well, like William Saliba, Gabriel and Ben White, but these two were the real difference makers this season, and one could argue that with the difference from Arsenal last season to this one, then surely Declan Rice was the best player because he was the main component of that improvement. But when you look at the numbers Odegaard was putting up, it becomes very hard to not pick him. Just look at those progressive passes, 9.29 on average per 90 minutes. You'd be very hard pressed to find someone putting up higher numbers than that. It's stats like that that show how important Odegaard is to this team in the middle of the park, being able to move the play up and get his teammates into dangerous positions. And without him, Arsenal probably wouldn't have pulled the title race to the last day of the season. It's a funny one because I included Rice in my team of the year and not Odegaard, but that was more on the basis of the balance of the team than just the player individually. And considering this list is solely looking at that, Odegaard's my pick. Aston Villa, Ollie Watkins, a very easy decision here. Ollie Watkins has been incredible this season with 19 goals and 13 assists in the league. The lad put up the second highest goals and assists combined numbers in the entire league, and if you had have suggested that might happen at the start of the season, you would have been laughed out of town. Aston Villa finished in 4th place, higher than pretty much anyone predicted, and Ollie Watkins was the main factor in that. There is no way they would have got close to 4th place without him in my eyes. He's creeping up the Aston Villa goal scoring charts, and if he has a similar season for them in 24-25 as he had this time around, he will be ending the season as the all-time record goal scorer in the Premier League for Aston Villa, who will also be playing Champions League football for the first time in 40 years. Not bad for someone who was playing League 2 football just 7 years ago. Bournemouth, Dominic Solanke, from one easy decision after a surprising season for a striker who finished the campaign on 19 goals, to another easy decision after a surprising season for a striker who finished the campaign on 19 goals. Who would have possibly envisioned that Dominic Solanke, a man whose best goal scoring return in the top division was 6 previously, would end the season with 19 goals for a Bournemouth side who finished the campaign in 12th place. A fantastic season for both player and club, and a surprising one at that. The meteoric rise of Solanke this season has been nothing short of exceptional. It has been an absolute joy to see him finally hitting the heights of his potential, and long may these performances continue. And I tell you what, he should feel massively hard done by for not being selected for the England squad. If you watched my England selection, you will know that I thought he should be boarding that plane to Germany. But what did you think? Let me know in the comments. Brighton, Pascal Gross, in a season which was somewhat disappointing for a team who qualified for Europe last season, there weren't many complete standout performers. It shows how much Brighton have progressed during their years back in the top division that we can even say those things. But it is true. This is a team now who on paper should probably be top 8, and they've got some excellent players in there. Van Heck at the back has been solid, and João Pedro has proven to be an excellent signing with room to grow. But the top dog is Gross. For me, he's like a fine wine. He just keeps getting better with age, and this season has been no exception. Being right at the cream of the crop for a midfielder with assists, XAG, shot creation, passes attempted and progressive passes paints a very similar picture to the aforementioned Odegaard for Arsenal. Gross has been an underrated player for a long time now, and it's about time that he starts getting recognised for just how good and how important of a player he is for this squad. Burnley, Sander Berg. Unfortunately for Burnley, it has been a very poor season. A season in which they invested heavily into the team, had a good young coach, a good setup, and looked as though they were going to really tackle this league, but that did not prove to be the case. With the 3rd lowest goals scored and the 3rd lowest goals conceded, they just could not get it right at either end of the pitch, which is why I've gone for someone in the middle. No one within this team really had a very good season, and I'm sure they will be chomping at the bit to go again in the Championship to come straight great backup, but Berge was probably the closest to showing that he deserves to stay in the Premier League. A solid player and a big one at that, who did his best to help keep those goals conceded down as much as he could, which you can see by his defensive statistics, which actually stack up rather favourably for a midfielder. There's going to be changes at Burnley this season, and I think Berge will be the first name on the list for any interested clubs looking to cherry pick the team. So here's an interesting one to think about. Out of the 3 promoted teams coming up, which one could you most likely see him joining? Chelsea, Cole Palmer. I'm getting slightly bored of speaking about Cole Palmer. He has been coming up in all of my videos over the past few weeks, and how much more can I say about the guy other than he has been absolutely frigging brilliant. In a team who struggled for consistency throughout the entirety of the season, Palmer was the only one who continued his incredible form throughout. With 22 goals and 11 assists, he was the only man in the league to achieve a higher combined goals and assist tally than Ollie Watkins, which is phenomenal for a lad who had played less than 500 minutes in the league prior to his arrival at the club. I think a special mention does need to be given to Conor Gallagher and Malo Gusto, who both perform well in a disjointed team, but there's no way you are looking past Palmer for this entry. Crystal Palace, Eberechi, Eze. There's a whole host of players who could have easily been the pick for this one, and I think there wouldn't be too many arguments from you lot watching, particularly since Glasner's arrival. Joachim Andersen has become a stalwart at the back. Jefferson Lerma has been a monster in the middle. Adam Wharton has been a breath of fresh air. Michael Olise has been pure star power, and Jean-Philippe Mateta has been a goal machine. So this was a hard pick, but in the end I opted for Eze. They've had their injury issues this season, but when Eze and Olise have been on the pitch together, whether that be since Glasner's appointment or prior, they have absolutely torn teams apart together. They've been completely unstoppable, and I will be very intrigued to see just how long Palace could keep these two together. It's a close call, but with 11 goals and 4 assists, with the couple on the final day to boot, Eze's been incredibly clinical for a team who historically struggled to get the goal. Such a talented player who deserves all of the plaudits that he receives. But put in the comments whether you agree with this entry or whether I should have picked one of the other players mentioned. Everton, Jordan Pickford, the first goalkeeper of the list, and I think no team this season has relied on their goalkeeper as much as Everton have on Jordan Pickford. Both centre-backs in James Tarkowski and Jarrad Branthwaite could have been reasonable picks here, but I think the man with the second most clean sheets in the league, in the second best defence in the league this season, deserves the pick. Keeping 1 clean sheet in every 3 games is an incredible return, particularly for a team who survived relegation by 1 point the season prior. Of course, the defence is a huge part of that, but Pickford is the most important, with a save percentage of 74.1% of the shots he has faced on target, which by the way was 166, a hell of a lot more than the 70 shots that David Raya faced for Arsenal. Pickford gets some flack for his small arms, but obviously with these stats, those arms don't get in the way of him being one of the better goalkeepers in the whole league. Fulham, João Paulinho, coming this close to losing Paulinho at the start of the season in a transfer to Bayern Munich. Fulham managed to hold on to their main man, their player of the season the previous year, and for me, he has carried that on again into this season. He is the star player within this team, and it has been yet another standout season for him. A tough tackler who is one of the best in the league at breaking up the play. Before finding the right pass to begin the counter-attack, Fulham would massively struggle to replace him if Bayern or another giant club come again for him in this summer. The European Championships might give them a bit of breathing space in that department, but it is still going to be a real fight for them to keep hold of this outstanding player. And in another real fight, I am pushing to increase the amount of subscribers within this football community that I'm trying to build. So if you enjoy content like this and want to be a part of that community, you know what to do. And if you don't, I'll tell you. Hit that subscribe button. Liverpool, Virgil van Dijk, Mohamed Salah scored the most goals. Alexis McAllister had the biggest impact, but Virgil van Dijk was the star man for Liverpool this season, having to deal with a constantly changing backline all season. Out of the usual starters, Alisson missed 10 games, as did Trent, Konate missed 16, and Robertson missed 15. In front of him, the departure of Fabinho meant that the centre defensive mid position changed as well. The guy had to deal with constant change all around him this season. His first ever season as captain of the club, but not only did he step up, he was back to his best yet again. Dominant in the air, strong in the tackle, vision for a pass, and leadership from the back. Verge did everything and more in a rather difficult season for the Reds. And when you consider that Carabao Cup final, a final he has been lauded as winning on his own, from centre-back, there's no doubt in my mind that he was the best player for Liverpool this season. Luton, Ross Barkley. I did consider Teden Mengi, who was a real force for Luton at the back in a very tough and demanding first appearance in the league, but ultimately when a free signing is getting mentioned in the same breath as contention for the England squad for the Euros despite playing for a relegated team, you have to take note of that. I was intrigued when Luton signed Barkley. I've seen him at his best where he can be absolutely unplayable, but I've also seen him at his worst where he can be no more impactful than a shadow in the middle of the park. It could have gone either way for him, but Barkley saw this as an opportunity to get his career back on track, and oh how he has done that. Just take a look at his underlying stats, which are fantastic for a central midfielder and are reminiscent of a young Barkley back in the Everton academy when he used to remind me of a young Steven Gerrard with his direct runs, powerful dribbling and all-out action in front of goal. It was great to see him back playing at the top level, and I will be following him closely this summer to see where exactly he ends up. If you'd like to see him join your team, put it down in the comments. Manchester City, Rodri. A lot of people will be saying Phil Foden, particularly after he won the Player of the Season, but in my eyes, the best player at Manchester City and my Player of the Season was Rodri. Foden was absolutely world class, there's no doubt about it, but I don't think he was as important as Rodri. I think if you take Foden out of that team, despite his outrageous talent, he is easier to replace than Rodri is, and that was proven this season. Manchester City lost every single game other than one against Luton in which Rodri didn't feature. That would be an outrageous stat for any player at any team, but when we are talking about arguably the strongest team in the world and they are relying on a player that heavily, then there is no doubt in my mind that he should be their Player of the Season. His underlying stats, as I've pulled up before, are at the absolute top of the pack. For me, he's the top of the pack of this club. Manchester United, Bruno Fernandes, possibly the obvious choice for most, but I was actually very tempted to pick Diogo Dalot for this pick. I think he's been one of the few decent performers in what has been Manchester United's worst ever Premier League season from a position perspective. Having finished 8th in the league, he's played well in a poor squad and has shown versatility to play either side, but ultimately I couldn't ignore Bruno Fernandes. 10 goals and 8 assists was vital for a team struggling to find consistent goal scorers, and despite his haters, no one can deny that Fernandes has always been the most creative player in front of goal for this team since his arrival, but the stats that surprised me were his defensive ones. For an attacking midfielder, just look at these stats. In the top 87% for average tackles, interceptions and blocks, as well as in the top 98% for clearances. Maybe those stats read more of United this season than their attacking midfielder is having to put in such a defensive shift, but I think it also speaks for just how industrious he has been and how much effort he has put in to try and improve them. Newcastle United, Alexander Isak. I've always liked Isak. For years I thought he was a really talented player, but even then I don't think I ever thought he was going to be the type of striker to score 21 goals in the Premier League. Anthony Gordon has had an absolutely superb season as well, but Isak for me, just wow. I don't actually think enough has been spoken about just how good he has been. Everyone has been focused on Haaland, Palmer, Watkins and Solanke to notice the man from Sweden putting up absolutely fantastic numbers. He's been compared to Thierry Henry, and those numbers are definitely Henry numbers. If he can continue this progression that he's making, he's either going to drag Newcastle back up into the Champions League spots next season, or he's going to move on to another team who's already in it. Put it in the comments where you think he'll be this time next year. Nottingham Forest, Morgan Gibbs-White. He was my Player of the Season last year for Nottingham Forest, and he has gone on to be my Player of the Season for them yet again. I really expected Forest to step on from their first year back in the Prem, and in particular that end of season form they displayed. I thought they made clever moves in last summer's transfer market, and I envisioned a season ahead in which they'd solidify themselves as a real Premier League club, but oh my, they survived by the skin of their teeth, and only because there were 3 teams below them in the league who were so much worse than anyone else. They were lucky to survive the season, and few players can be considered to have a good season, but Gibbs-White is one of those few. I thought the transfer fee paid for him back in 2022 was crazy, however he's truly proven me wrong since then. Great runner with the ball, a real powerhouse in the middle, and great at dragging his team up the pitch. He's definitely the star man at Forest, and they'll have a job on their hands to hold on to him, unless that is they have to sell him to balance the financial books, of course. Sheffield United, Ben Brayton Diaz. Okay, cat's out the bag. In case you somehow didn't know, Sheffield United had a bad season, the joint third worst in Premier League history, in fact, and there was next to no positive things whatsoever to come out of their season, other than the fact that they'll at least get back to winning some games in the Championship next season, perhaps. Other than that, the second best thing was probably the addition of Ben Brayton Diaz in the January transfer window, as he added a bit of attacking impetus, which was sorely lacking from a desperately poor team. 6 goals and 1 assist was the result of his efforts, means that he directly contributed to 20% of the team's entire goal count throughout the season from just the 14 games that he featured in. It is a shame for Sheffield United that his transfer was only on a loan, but at least he gave them something to cheer about this season. Spurs Heung-min Son, the 22-23 season was a drop-off for Son as he struggled for form throughout the campaign, but in the absence of Harry Kane this season, he stepped right back up to the plate and hit a bunch of home runs as he spearheaded the most recklessly attacking side that we have ever seen. With 17 goals and 10 assists in the league, Son was right back to his best and forced a number of defences to crumble in front of his superior talent. If you take a look at his underlying statistics, he is in the green in all of the goal scoring and passing stats for his position, and deep green for most. The guy tops the percentiles of so many categories that he's probably up there as one of the most efficient attackers in the world, never mind just in the league. West Ham Jarrod Bowen, one of my favourite attacking players outside of the top 6 teams. But for how long? Let me know in the comments if you think one of the Premier League giants will come in for him in the summer. In my opinion, I think they might, but his chances of making that jump are slipping away, and if he wants it, he may have to force it through. Hopefully for West Ham fans, that's not going to be the case, as they absolutely love him there, and I don't blame them one bit. The lad is an absolute workhorse down that wing, and he's deadly in front of goal, whether it be cutting in on that wing or whether it be filling in up top for a team who have a glaring absence of quality in the striking position. 16 goals is a huge return in the Premier League for any player, never mind one of a mid-table team who is naturally a winger. He earned his place in the England squad, and he has earned his place in this list. Wolves, Matheus Cunha. I don't think there is anyone else who can challenge for this last place in my list. I saw somewhere else someone picking Pedro Neto as the best Wolves player this season, and he is a great player for sure, but with injuries, the lad featured 1,000 minutes less than Cunha and contributed to 8 goals less. If Neto had more game time, then maybe, but my props are going to Cunha. A rather poor load spell in the season before made Wolves' obligation to sign Cunha on a permanent look like a massive blunder in that deal, but it's actually turned out to be a vital piece of business for them in this campaign. A squad stripped of their core talent, Cunha has stepped up to the challenge of scoring goals for Wolves, and he has been absolutely pivotal in their finish of 14th place and 20 points above the relegation zone. A relegation zone that some were thinking Wolves could be pulled into after the decimation of their squad and management team in the summer of 2023. But huge props to Gary O'Neill, the team, and this man right here for turning it all around and ending up with a real commendable season. There we are, the video's done. You can go home now, but before you do, why don't you like, comment and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video, and if you want a taste of some more content from this budding football channel, then make sure to check me out on TikTok, X, Instagram and Twitch, which is where I stream EAFC every single week, all under the same handle, Bolts96, but please do remember that the O is a 0. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.